Thanks for tuning in to The Real Deal Show, brought to you by ebodyboarding.com and Tribe Boards. Well, hello everyone, Jay Reale back at you with another Real Deal Show, and my favorite co-host is here alongside me, the lovely Vicki Reale. How are you today, Vicki?
Good.
Should we kiss on camera, just like...
That's for home.
So Vicki, in case you don't know, is my wife of 23 years as the day we record this. And she was, back in the day, one of the top professional bodyboarders in the world, which is sort of leading us a segue, if you will, into the subject of this episode. And what is the subject, Vicki?
I thought it'd be a great idea, since March is Women's History Month, that we should talk about us chicks, us boogie chicks.
Okay.
And, a bit of the history and the culture. And
That's an inside joke that we'll tell you at another time. But so, yes, I didn't even know there was a Women's History Month. Is there a Men's History Month?
It's like women all over the world. It's not
right.
women's bodyboarding.
I understand
history.
that.
Yes, I'm not sure, actually.
No, of course there's not. No.
Because it's every month, Jay.
Yes, this is true. All right, so Women's History Month. We're going to talk about the history of women's bodyboarding and a long and illustrious history. It is. So let's go right back to the very beginning. The bodyboard was invented in July of 1971. We know that, by Tom Morey. We've talked about that on a prior Real Deal show. So by proxy, the very first female bodyboarder was who?
Marsha.
Marsha,
yes.
Morey.
Yes.
So Marsha Morey, she's recounted this story before. And the cool part of the story is that she was actually pregnant with Sol, her son, at the time she rode the first boogie. She was pretty pregnant, too. I want to say she was like 7 months pregnant, and she went out and rode the boogie. She was the first female bodyboarder.
On the Big Island, right?
Yes, way back in 1971. And the cool part is we had Marsha actually riding her bodyboard at the memorial that we did for Tom back in October. And I'm going to link that up at the top here so you can watch that episode as well.
Yeah,
really
she
cool.
rocked that. And how old is she?
She did. She's, I want to say she's late 70s maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure. We don't know for sure, but man, it was a big day, and she charged out there without any hesitation for sure.
She's still got the guts.
She does indeed. Yeah. So Marsha was the first female bodyboarder, and of course there was a lot of women that took up the sport in the late 70s. Another very notable addition to that list would be Patty Serrano and Debbie Caldwell. So they're sisters. And tell us about what you know about Debbie Caldwell. Let's start with Debbie.
Yeah, she's the owner of Custom X since back then. I don't know.
1988, I believe she started Custom X.
To this day, she's still the owner of it. And
she used to work for Tom, by the way. She made boards in Tom's original factory down there in Carlsbad.
And then her sister Patty, she used to run BIA.
She did, which was...
Yeah, was it? BIM.
Yeah, the well, no, she ran both. So there was the BIA, which was the Bodyboarder International Association. They ran contests here in Southern California in the late 90s, early 2000s. And the magazine, which was BIM. I'm leading you into this.
Bodyboard International Magazine.
Yeah, so she did both of those things. But before that, she did what? Do you know? Patty.
Worked for Morey.
Of course, she was... she was Tom's first ever promotions and marketing person.
That's right.
So he hired her to take the boogie around the United States and turn people on to the sport of bodyboarding. So women bodyboarders were right in the mix of things from the get-go. So this is late 70s. Those two were very prolific here in Southern California. Over in Hawaii, things were taking shape as well. And there were a couple of really interesting bodyboarders. Well, one in particular I can think of. Her name was Phyllis. Tell us about Phyllis.
Phyllis
Vicki.
Dameron, yeah. What I know of her, and I actually found some footage of her recently at Waimea Bay. She was the first female surfer bodyboarder to ever ride Waimea. Do you know?
I don't know if that's confirmed, but she's the first female I ever saw pictures of riding Waimea Bay.
Charging big Waimea. You know, I don't know about her style, but she took off on some bombs.
Yeah, well, the style back then was you sort of put your chest down on the board and both elbows down and used basically the board as just a planing surface. There wasn't a whole lot of maneuvers going on in the sport. And Phyllis would paddle out at Waimea, which was basically a gladiator pit full of testosterone. And here comes Phyllis in her little tiny bikini. By the way, I don't know how the bikini stayed on when she's riding 20-foot Waimea, but somehow, I guess it did. Maybe it came off. Who knows? Maybe she had some system rigged up where it didn't come off. But there's pictures of her and video of her.
Yeah.
They called her Fearless Phyllis. And she would just bounce down the face, sometimes with surfboard, like 12-foot surfboards right next to her face. Like, so dangerous.
Yeah, and I don't know if you ever looked at her board. Super flimsy. I don't know, one of those Moray BC 136s or something it looked like, but it was really flexible and basically a piece of foam.
Which was how bodyboards were back then. There were no slick bottoms, no stringers. The cores were low density polyethylene, and the skins were polyethylene. There is something to be said for the shock absorption of that softer foam back then. Yeah. So if you're bouncing your way down the face, not so hard of an impact as it would be if you did it on a modern bodyboard.
And a stiff modern bodyboard.
Yeah. So Phyllis was known for the big wave antics out there at Waimea Bay. And then we move into the early 80s, and there was another long blonde-haired woman there on the North Shore.
Lisa?
What's her name? No, I'm talking about Carol Phillips.
Oh, Carol, of course. Yeah.
So Carol, she pioneered bodyboarding for women at Pipeline.
Yeah.
She absolutely charged the bag out of it. She was really, to me, like I went to Hawaii the first year in 82. She was really the only female out at Pipeline. Again, gladiator pit full of testosterone out there at Pipe. And there's, Carol Phillips, again in a bikini, I think the move was to try to disarm the guys, or charm them, maybe a combination of the two.
Get a couple waves.
But she got a couple waves. There's some clips online of her getting giant waves, but also getting absolutely ripped apart on a couple. You remember the one clip?
Like Scorpion, or I don't know what they call it, the one she's dropping into a beast and pitched her.
Well, no, what happened is she get to the bottom and the lip just detonated on her feet and blew her up in the air, and she did like 2 or 3 flips in the air in front of the wave. That one's gone viral about 3 or 4 times on social media over the years. But Carol did not just, I have to do a little sidebar on Carol because she's so important to the history of the sport, in my opinion. She did not just charge waves. She did a ton
behind the
for women's bodyboarding, along with Betty DiPolito, who was a surfer, a pro surfer in the 70s and 80s, but really took up the cause of getting, recognition and competitions going for women.
Women in general, not just bodyboarding.
Not just bodyboarders,
surfing,
but surfing and bodyboarding. And those two collaborated, and they still do. They still do. Yeah. And the cool part is, we just had, as we record this in February of 2022, we just had the big Pipeline event for the WSL, and we saw Moana Jones take out the women's surfing. And it was such a big deal that women got to surf Pipeline. But the reality of it is that Betty DiPolito, way back in 2005, had a women's surfing event at Pipeline. Long time ago. That's 17 years ago. And that event was won by Alana Blanchard in the shortboard division. And the longboard was Kim Hamrock. And the bodyboard,
how do you remember this stuff?
The bodyboard division was won by none other than your predecessor for the crown of women's bodyboarding in Australia, Kira Llewellyn.
That's right.
So she won that event.
What was it?
Well, again, that was 2005 was that particular event. But Kira had won a world title before that. So she was the first,
That's what I was thinking of. I feel like she won pipe in the 90s.
Yeah, well, I think it was maybe early 2000s that she took her title. I Googled that, but sorry, Kira, if you're watching this, I couldn't remember the year you won your title, but you were, as I recall, maybe the first non-Brazilian ever to win at Pipeline.
2002.
But I could be wrong there.
Little Gromit from Australia.
Yeah, little Kira from the Sunshine Coast. So anyway, Carol, Phillips, and Betty, they continue to fight for women's bodyboarding. There's going to be an event at the end of this month, right?
Yes.
Talk about that.
Confirmed. Yeah, February 24th to the March 12th, something like that. Waiting period alongside men's bodyboarding and men's body surfing. So super stoked to get women bodyboarding back at Pipe, and hopefully we get good waves like the WSL did. But the women have been charging Pipe on a bodyboard forever, and the pits that they can get that surfer girls can't get, I think, and busting the lip on these waves, it's going to be incredible to watch. That I wish it would hit mainstream media like women surfing would, because it's they're just great to watch. Yeah,
so women bodyboarders have been charging Pipeline for many, many, many years and pulling into the barrel, hitting the lip, ripping at Pipeline. And these events that the women have had go way back. As we mentioned, the very first women's bodyboarding event, I believe, was in 1990.
1990. I think Stephanie took that, right?
So that's a good question. So that event in 1990, I think
Stephanie took it.
It might have been Stephanie, but world champs have been crowned for women. Let's say, I wrote some notes here, so I apologize, I'm looking down here. The first year that we crowned a women's world champ was 1987. And back then, it was one event that crowned the world champion. I think it was at Sandy Beach, and it was Glenda Kozlowski. So one event determined the women's world champ for several years, really, all the way up until 1995. But it was Glenda Kozlowski, Mariana Nogueira, and Stephanie Peterson that swapped victories over all those years between 87 and 95 to be crowned world champ. But we all knew that, they were amazing bodyboarders, all of them.
But from one event.
But from one event and it was the same with the men. Mike Stewart won at Pipeline 9 times and became world champion. There was a host of riders that got crowned world champ, like Eppo and others, by virtue of winning that one event at Pipe. Yeah. So the turning point came in 1994, actually, when the very first GOB event was held. That's the Global Organization of Bodyboarders. Was held at Viana do Castelo in Portugal. So we went to that event. I don't think you went. It was a little early for you. But I went over there, and we all competed because we were so excited to see that there's going to be a world tour for bodyboarding, a series of events. So that was really the sort of the test event. And in the final was Steve McKenzie and GT, Guilherme Tamaga. I can't remember. It seems to me like McKenzie won it. I could be wrong on that. I should have looked that up.
And you think this is 94?
That was 94, yeah. So then the next year, 95, we had a series of events, which started in Maroochydore in Australia. That was the very first event on what was going to be a series of events. And we had some events in different places. We went to Japan, we went to Europe, back to Portugal. The Sintra Pro, I think, started that year, if I'm not mistaken. But the point is that was the first year we legitimately had several events where the riders accumulated points. And who won the very first GOB World Tour?
Claudia Ferrari.
Yes.
She got crowned at Pipe. That was the final event of that tour, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a really kind of a bittersweet day. If you remember.
There was some judging.
Well, there was some, no, it wasn't judging issues. It was administrative issues adding up the points. and somebody had miscalculated the points, and it was announced that I believe that Mariana Nogueira had won the first world tour. And then, so Claudia, she was gracious about it. And, she kind of missed the whole thunder of winning the first world tour because all the crowd was there, the media, and then it was all over, and there was
cheering for Mariana.
Yeah, cheering for Mariana, and then there was a retally, and it was determined that Claudia had in fact won. And some of the riders were still there at Ehukai Beach Park celebrating, and then it was
Get
determined.
Up there, Claudia.
Yeah, so it was such a bummer, and there was it was just a really a weird evening, afternoon, but in the end, Claudia Ferrari was crowned the first ever GOB World Tour champion. So she has that in that feather in her cap. So after she won that world title, several of the Brazilian ladies dominated on the world tour. Name some of the names.
Yeah, Daniela Freitas, Ronquillo.
Now Ronquillo.
Yes.
Yep.
Neymara, Carvalho, Carla Costa. There's so many, but what we haven't mentioned is some of the Hawaiian girls, like Shawnee.
For sure.
Shawnee Oide. That's now Lyman, Aka's wife. One of the standouts back then alongside Carol.
Chris Ann Kim.
Mar, Chris Ann Kim.
Jen Mar. There was Aaron Kamano. There was a lot of really highly visible riders from Hawaii back then. We can't forget even Melanie Bartels, who was a really good stand-up surfer, but also a really good bodyboarder.
Yes.
She was good on any board.
Yes,
she could get out there and rip.
Another Hawaiian that if we go back several years ago that we didn't mention was Lisa Stewart.
Yes, Mike Stewart's wife.
Mike's wife, yes. If I remember, wasn't she even in some Moray commercials with you guys?
She was in commercials. She was in the Juicy Fruit commercial.
Yeah.
She actually competed in the first ever pipe event.
She did.
And I think she beat Daniel Kaimi in the trials, but he still advanced and ended up winning that event.
Women and men surfed together.
Women could enter, but there was no women's division. Which brings up another point. So we had over here in the mainland, we had the Bud Surf Tour. It was originally called the PSAA Tour that started in the mid-'80s. And by 1990, the top women in the world, some of the Brazilian girls, wanted to compete, on par with the guys. And quite honestly, they were legit. They totally had a shot. And I remember Stephanie Peterson came over and did some of the tour events. I can't remember who else. Maybe Daniela did a few. And Stephanie did well. I had a heat against her at Salt Creek. We were in the semifinals. She had pushed all the way through the semis, and her and I mixed it up out there, and I was given an interference, which I protest to this day. I think it was her that should have been given.
Ladies first, Jay. Ladies first.
Sorry, Steph. I know you call me Barney Rubble all the time. That's funny. But anyway, Stephanie held her own. She ripped, and I think she went pretty far in that event. In fact, that may have been a quarterfinal, and then she made it to the semis. But yeah, she ripped it up. And then, we had some really good riders here in Southern California as well. You had Gina Minetti, who became U.S. champion. Debbie Bradbury. Chris, then Seagraves, now Wagon. I know I'm leaving some out. But there was a host of female bodyboarders, Jen Miskov, who used to compete in all the events. And of course, Tara Parsons, who was then Tara Higgins, Monica De La More, Lisa Gonzalez, Kayla Grodzin, who was then Kayla Valenzuela from Puerto Rico, would come over when she started dating Joe. So they all did the BIA events here in Southern California because they couldn't necessarily afford to fly over to Hawaii all the time for contests. So we had a crew here. And then in Australia, you guys had a burgeoning crew of riders. Name some of the names.
In the 90s, there's all these bodyboard clubs up and down the Australian coast, Port Macquarie Bodyboarding Club was what I was in, and we had a good dozen girls that did the events every month. And then you went up the coast of Queensland, same thing, down to Sydney. Simone Enright, and all the way back to Julie Robotham, the first bodyboard girl in Australia, lived up in the Sunshine Coast, I believe.
Inland from there, yeah.
Yeah, I think she pioneered the boogie there in Australia. But, lots of notables to this day. Lily Pollard, one of the best, coming out of Australia.
And Britt Kennedy.
Britt Kennedy, yeah, one of my best friends.
Who, by the way, is still stomping heads up there now in Queensland where she lives. She's like dominating the bodyboard club events up there still. Yep. I mean, that's 30 years on, you know.
And Emma Roby, Mandy Zirin.
Rebecca Villarino.
Yep.
Yeah, and did you mention Lily? Yeah, you did say Lily Pollard, who, is kind of took the torch in more recent years, and she won one of what was then the IBA World Tour events in Puerto Rico, ripping, and still charges and rips around the Cronulla area.
Yeah, that's the thing about some of these Aussie girls, they got some really solid reef breaks to ride down there, so if only they could get to the pipe event this year, I think some of them would do really well.
Let's talk about European riders. Name some of the names from Europe, a couple names out of there that are blowing minds.
Yeah, Joanna Schecker.
Well, back in the day, it was Dora
back
Gomes.
then,
But now,
Rita Perez from Portugal. Canaries. What was the drop knee girl?
That was Marina Taylor.
Yeah, she was blowing minds back then as one of the best drop knee girls. We forgot to mention Dora in Hawaii. I said
Dora Gomes.
No, the Hawaiian drop knee girl.
Oh, Nora
Neal.
Neal.
Yeah, sorry, Nora.
Who lives here in California now.
Yeah, that's right. But Dora Gomes from Portugal, she was known as the gas helmet, charger back in the day.
A lot,
yeah.
But now, you mentioned Joanna Shanker, who was world champion from Portugal, and the youngest world champ ever in our sport was from Canary Islands more recently.
Rinder.
Alexandra Rinder.
Yes.
And the woman who, in my opinion, is the best female bodyboarder I've ever seen ride a board.
Isabella Souza. Is
yes,
that what we're getting at?
Isabella Souza.
To Brazil.
So.
Yes, amazing. I mean, she should enter all the events against the guys.
Yeah,
she'd give them a run for their money. She's amazing.
She's incredible. And,
absolutely.
The cool part, we dip now into Brazil again, is it's insane to know that all of these women, your peers of the day, back when we used to do the world tour, are still really fit and really good at bodyboarding. None of them have sort of moved away from the sport. I mean, granted, most of them have kids, families, and they don't get to spend all day, every day in the water. None of us do these days, but they're still out there and they're still killing it.
They really are. If there was, a world tour like we had back then today, I still think a lot of those women would be at the top of the, the podium. And for me personally, I'm almost 50. I feel like I'm better and stronger and experienced and knowledgeable about, bodyboarding and competing and, know my body well. And, we've been around for a while. And so I feel like, a lot of us could dominate. I remember competing at the US Open one year and, I hadn't competed in a long time and I was up against all these younger girls, and what I think helped me win that was the experience, knowing, what I needed to do, how many waves I needed to catch, keeping an eye on the time. And so that experience really plays a part in, being a good bodyboarder and a good competitor. But what we haven't got to is Japan.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up. So Japan has really been an epicenter. It always was for bodyboarding. Let's do a little mini vignette here about Japan, because back in our day when we were full-time pro bodyboarders, Japan was a really important stop on the tour. In fact, there were several stops down there. Let's talk about those history days in Japan.
Yeah, Japan was full of women bodyboarders. Oe Koike, she was a superstar over there. She's one of the first Japanese girls to really give the Brazilians a run for their money, and even at Pipe, and she would do the world tour, and she had really good style, and she had a huge following in Japan, big sponsors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, there was also Kozue Arai.
Yes.
And Kazumi Uzawa.
Yeah.
They were sort of darlings of the media down there.
Yeah.
And the media in Japan for
huge.
Bodyboarding was huge, but it was totally geared to women. Talk about the women's magazines back then.
Yeah, there was Flipper magazine, and what was the other one called?
I think it was called Bodyboard Life, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. But it was kind of like a fashion magazine for women in Japan, but it focused on female bodyboarders. Myself, the Brazilian girls, some other Australian, European girls, we were kind of superstars over there also. They wanted to know what we would wear and what we would eat, and really get into like the makeup and the fashion, and it was a really cool. I would go over there and they'd be like, Vicki Greason, Vicki Greason. And you'd rock up to the beach and they'd want your autograph, and women's bodyboarding there was almost as bigger than male bodyboarding.
Almost. It was way bigger. Yeah.
And even was up there with surfing.
Yeah. So, surfing, was the guys surfed, the women rode bodyboards in Japan. So, the guys in Japan that were really good at bodyboarding, basically they played second fiddle to the girls.
It was interesting.
So when we go there, all the girls, the Brazilian girls, and the girls and Vicki that were dominating the world tour were superstars. They were on TV, they were in the magazines, they were in mainstream publications. They were the focus of the attention. The guys to a lesser extent, for sure, but still the sport in general, bodyboarding, was huge. We had, I remember one year we had 3 stops in Japan back to back. We had a wave pool event over there, and we traveled. We had a couple different wave pool events. We traveled around. The photographers were frothing to get pictures of bodyboarding. It was exploding, and in recent years now that legacy has continued. We mentioned Aoi Koike, right? She moved to Hawaii years ago, started a family after she sort of retired from international competition, and taking the torch from her, a couple of young riders from Japan.
There's a few. Ohara.
Sari
Ohara, and of course everyone knows Ayaka.
Ayaka Suzuki / Crilly, married to Hawaiian bodyboarder Mac Crilly.
Yes, and
and she lives in Hawaii now.
That's right, yeah. And there's so many more Japanese girls that we don't know about that have their own tour in Japan, and the sponsorship too. We never got to that, but the sponsorship for female bodyboarders in Japan, including myself and the Brazilians, we all had Japanese sponsors. They were paying us big bucks, paying us to travel on the tour, paying to endorse their products and making products, that we would endorse. I was sponsored by this company called Arena that they pay me a lot of money to this day, that I have, my house and many things because of that. My own line of boards and fins and wetsuits and clothing. And it was just huge. And to this day, they're still supporting women's bodyboarding, mainly Japanese bodyboarders these days. So I was in at the right time back then. But so many good bodyboarders. It'd be interesting to see this pipe contest.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be dominated by the Japanese girls.
I hitched my wagon to this star for that reason. So, we're going to be in another part of the world during the waiting period of the event. Yeah, I mean, if we weren't, would you go over the contest?
Absolutely.
So there you go.
Surf pipe with 3 other women, and to support the sport and take out some of the young ones. No.
So, I mean, it's really cool to see your generation still has the passion.
Ripping.
And, still rides. I mean, you ride as well as you ever did. And I believe what you said earlier, that if you girls from your generation decided to jump back into the mix on the world tour, it would be a struggle for the younger generation.
But you know what's also interesting and kind of cool is a lot of us have kids and girls. Neymara has her daughter in Brazil who's dominating the circuit over there.
Oh, yeah.
And amazing. And, you know, my daughter Sage, she dabbled in it a couple of times. She's more of a longboarder. But it's cool to see that these women now have kids that are getting into it. And the next generation, if, you know, only there was a tour for them.
Yeah, I know. That's true. So that moves us into currently there are not many opportunities for competition for women. Nowhere near what there used to be. Here in Southern California this year, there was a resurgence, if you will. So a group of riders from the APB, that's Association of Professional Bodyboarders, which formerly oversaw the World Tour, but now as a riders organization, they got together and put on 3 events, the California Bodyboarding Alliance events. It was basically a mini tour, if you will, here in Southern California. And that brought a few of the girls from many years of riding back out of the woodwork. I want to say Tara Parsons, who absolutely dominated that tour, came out of the woodwork, which she didn't. She's been bodyboarding all along.
That's right.
So she's been out of the woodwork since day one and has really, I mean, she's still improving.
For sure.
And she's like in your age range. And she just crushed it on that tour.
Yeah.
In addition to the U.S. Bodyboarding U.S. Festival, which was another event. That was a Pro-Am event held in November. And she took that one out too.
Yeah, she surfs better than ever. You know, it's the whole age experience.
Yeah,
you know?
so you know, it's. I mean, the riders are there, but the opportunities from competition just aren't quite what they used to be.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I feel like with the whole vintage bodyboard coming back and these competitions kind of starting up again, I feel like there's going to be a resurgence of, you know, competition and more, you know, excitement and people getting back into it. I really hope that, you know, it's the start of something, and I believe it is.
I hope you're right. So the IBC now runs the World Tour. They just announced their World Tour schedule this year, and there's some killer events. So let's hope, crossing fingers, that we do see a resurgence. The sponsorship dollars aren't what they used to be. So a lot of these riders who travel in the IBC Tour, they're minimally funded. Most of them have day jobs, or at least not necessarily a day job, but a job of some sort to keep them financed to travel with these events.
And that's the unfortunate thing, you know, what they can do in the surf and, you know, promote these companies, but in our niche industry, when we're up against the giants of surfing, and particularly the women, it's like a few niches down, you know, it's a struggle, but...
Yeah, so, you know, but ultimately, the reason we bodyboard is for fun. Competition aside, there's still female bodyboarders in the water. There always will be.
Yep.
And we only hope that, you know, as the owners of ebodyboarding.com, that we can help foster the love of the sport. And, we have an employee here, Gianna Simonelli, who's a super keen bodyboarder.
Yep.
And, you know, she and Vicki are happy to give advice to people that want to pick out equipment. Maybe they're intimidated. They don't know what to get. I mean, Vicki and Gianna can help you. And, you know, the point is, you don't have to compete. You have to just just have to love the outdoors and love the ocean.
It's a lifestyle. I think the biggest thing for me has been to be able to do this for the rest of my life and have that lifestyle where I travel around the world and just boogie, you know? I get to go to these awesome places. It's a great workout, you know?
Yeah.
So I just wish I could, you know, encourage more women to get into the sport that I love, and it's just awesome and rad. So
it's a life sport.
Yeah,
for sure. Anything else? Closing words, Vicki, before we wrap this up?
No, just get your body on a boogie, girls.
Yeah, that's a trademark. Sorry, we're gonna have to get permission for that one.
Yeah, it's a great sport, awesome women, and I just hope this is a resurgence of getting more girls in the water.
Yeah.
You guys all want us in the water too.
Yes, I'd rather have, some girls in the water than more guys.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. Is that improper to say in 2022?
No, not at all.
Political
But we didn't
correctness.
mention, the girls' boards that are out there these days too. IACA has one. We have the Squaw, and a lot of the lines are making boards for women that suit women, that fit women, smaller, narrower, thinner.
Yep.
So that's kind of a cool.
Yeah. So the market's
New thing,
answering the
yeah.
call. So ladies, if you're out there, you're thinking about bodyboarding, get out there, enjoy the sun, enjoy the surf, get the fresh air, escape from computers and phones because they can't reach you out there. Don't wear a watch, an Apple Watch in the water, because you don't want anyone to be able to call you.
Gianna texted
Shut up. So that'll do it for this episode of The Real Deal Show. Thank you to my lovely wife, Vicki, for co-hosting this one for me.
It's fun.
We're stoked on women's bodyboarding and hope to see you in the surf soon. So that'll do it. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Give us the thumbs up, subscribe, throw some comments in down below. Thanks for listening on the audio podcast if that's what you did. This was a longer show than I normally do.
Sorry
so
if we missed anyone.
So I know we missed people
we
for
did,
sure,
probably,
but So anyway, thanks again, and as always, folks, we'll see you in the surf.